Every day, common sense gets dragged into a dark alley and beaten with a folding chair by somebody who says, "Relax, I know what I'm doing." The 10 people you're about to meet said some version of that, and reality responded like a debt collector with no patience left. This is not a how-to video. This is what happens when ego puts on safety goggles made of pure delusion. Story 1. The Bulletproof Vest Review Guy. Trent was the kind of man who thought doing your own research meant bothering 3 people at a barbecue and then trusting the dumbest answer. He loved gear: knives, flashlights, tactical gloves, boots that looked like they were preparing for war even though the hardest terrain he ever crossed was a muddy driveway. He was one of those guys whose entire personality was basically, what if Bass Pro Shops got hit in the head? So when Trent bought a bulletproof vest, normal people would have done one of 2 things. Option 1, wear it, feel weirdly powerful, then move on with life. Option 2, never need it, which is honestly the dream. Trent chose option 3. He decided the best way to test whether the vest worked was to wear it and have his buddy shoot him in the chest. That was the plan. That was the whole plan. No fine print, no backup, no second act. Now, this was happening in a backyard, which is important because no truly legendary American bad decision ever starts in a lab. It starts next to a grill, a cooler, and at least one folding chair that has seen domestic arguments. Somewhere there was probably a pickup truck. Somewhere else, a guy named Cody was holding a beer and saying, I mean, technically it should work. That is not science. That is a support group for future regrets. Trent, of course, was loving the attention. He had that look on his face, that smug, swollen little expression men get when they are about to do something catastrophically dumb, but still think it makes them look alpha. Chest puffed out, chin up, hands on hips, basically standing there like a divorced Captain America for idiots. His friend hesitated, which, to be fair, is a reasonable reaction when somebody says, "Hey man, want to help me test body armor by shooting me?" That is not a casual request. That is something you hear right before your entire weekend gets entered into evidence. But Trent had already committed emotionally, and once a man like that commits emotionally, logic is no longer in the building. He starts talking louder, which is how dumb men try to bully reality into cooperating. "It's bulletproof," he said. "Okay, Trent, and waterproof doesn't mean live at the bottom of the ocean forever. Words matter, details matter. Ratings matter. Distance matters. Type of round matters. But those are boring little facts. And boring little facts are the natural enemy of men trying to impress other men near lawn furniture. So Trent put on the vest and stood there in the yard like a human Yelp review with chest hair. And honestly, that's what kills me about guys like him. They always think they're proving courage, when really, they're just proving they have the risk assessment skills of a haunted shopping cart. Then came the moment. Everybody got quiet. His friend raised the gun. Trent nodded like this was some kind of military operation instead of a backyard IQ audit. And in one glorious, stupid second, the universe got to ask the question it always asks men like Trent. Are you absolutely sure? He was. That's the funniest part. All this because a grown man bought safety equipment and somehow decided the next logical step was to become his own crash test dummy. He didn't trust the manufacturer. He didn't trust the label. He trusted a friend with a gun and a backyard full of bad decisions. That's not confidence. That's stupidity wearing tactical gear. Story 2. The Safari Selfie Alpha. Derek was the kind of man who looked at a wild animal and immediately started wondering how to make it about himself. Not avoid it, not respect it, not admire it from the safe, legally suggested distance. No, Derek's first thought was always some variation of, this would go hard on Instagram. He was on a wildlife safari park tour with his girlfriend, which meant he had already spent the first half of the day doing exactly what every deeply irritating man does on vacation. Talking louder than necessary, pretending he knew animal behavior because he once watched 3 YouTube clips about alpha wolves, and taking sunglasses off selfies like the sun had personally shown up to light his jawline. Now, safari parks are actually pretty simple. The rules are written for a reason. Stay in the vehicle. Keep the windows mostly up. Don't feed anything. Don't get out because you suddenly feel spiritually called to become content. Derek, however, did not believe rules applied to him if he felt confident enough. And confidence, in Derek's case, was basically just stupidity with protein powder. So when their car rolled into an open grassland area and they spotted a massive bison standing off to the side of the road, every normal human in the vehicle had the exact same reaction. Wow. Derek had a different one. Oh, he's chill. That sentence should immediately revoke a man's right to make decisions near hooves. Because a bison is not chill. A bison is a mountain with anger management issues. It's a giant prehistoric brick of muscle, horns, and zero interest in helping your social media engagement. A bison can weigh more than a small car and move like a bad thought. Nature made that thing to look slow right up until it becomes your problem. But Derek didn't see danger. He saw opportunity. He saw a gigantic, photogenic animal standing in perfect light while he happened to be wearing a fitted t-shirt and a watch too expensive for his emotional range. In his diseased little influencer brain, the universe had basically set up a photo shoot. His girlfriend told him not to do it. A park sign had already told him not to do it. Common sense had definitely told him not to do it. Unfortunately, all three were speaking to a man who had built his whole personality around confusing recklessness with charisma. "Relax," he said. "I'm not going to touch it." That's such a funny thing for men like Derek to say, as if the only bad possible outcome is hugging the thing. As if being near a giant wild animal in loafers for a selfie isn't already a full collapse of adult judgment. So out he got, phone in hand, door open, ego leading the way. And right there, in that exact moment, every person still inside the vehicle became an unwilling audience to the oldest American tradition of all, a grown man mistaking proximity for control. Derek crept closer, angling his body half toward the camera, half toward the bison, doing that little side smile men do when they want a photo to say, "Yeah, I hang with beasts." In reality, the photo would have said, "I ignore signage for attention," and probably say, "Let's circle back," in arguments. The bison lifted its head. That was the warning, a free one, a huge, horned, biologically obvious warning from an animal whose entire body was built like a battering ram with feelings. Derek should have backed away right there. Any functioning brain cell, even one on part-time hours, would have stepped up and gone, "Hey champ, maybe not." But Derek had already gotten the phone up. And once a man has gone full selfie posture, survival becomes secondary to framing. All this for a picture. Not money, not food, not love. A picture. Derek didn't die because wildlife is unfair. He died because he looked at a giant untamed American murder cow and thought the biggest risk in the situation was bad lighting. Story 3. The Office Chair Tow Rope Olympian. Cody was the kind of man who looked at office furniture and thought, this could be a vehicle. Not a chair, not a place to sit while pretending to answer emails. A vehicle. That tells you almost everything you need to know about Cody, except for one important detail. He also believed any idea became automatically safe the second someone shouted, "Bro, I got you." And one hot Saturday afternoon, standing in a driveway with an old office chair, a tow rope, a pickup truck, and 3 friends with the judgment of raccoons on cough syrup, Cody decided he was about to change recreational transportation forever. Now, an office chair is already one of the dumbest possible things to move quickly in. It has tiny plastic wheels, 0 suspension, and the structural dignity of a conference call. It is designed for rolling 6 feet across stained carpet so a middle manager can grab a donut without standing up. It is not designed for outdoor speed, gravel, torque, or Cody. But Cody was not interested in design intent. Design intent is for engineers, and engineers, in Cody's worldview, were just nerds who hate fun and probably overcomplicate everything with numbers. So when somebody jokingly said, "You should tie that thing to the truck," Cody didn't hear a joke. He heard destiny. And that's the problem with men like Cody. They are always one sarcastic sentence away from an obituary. They treat mockery like encouragement and peer pressure like a scholarship. The second the rope came out, His eyes lit up with that beautiful, dead-behind-the-eyes excitement unique to men who are about to do something that will later be described as all this over absolutely nothing. His girlfriend, standing on the porch like a woman who had already spent years watching natural selection flirt with this man, asked the only adult question available. Why? A powerful question. A timeless question. A question Cody answered with the intellectual force of a can kicked down a driveway. Because it'll be sick. That was the full thesis. Not, we tested it. Not, I have protective gear. Not even, we're going slow. Just, it'll be sick. So they tied the rope to the office chair, or, more accurately, they wrapped it around the base a few times in the kind of knot men invent when they think Cub Scouts was for cowards. Then they hooked the other end to the back of the pickup. Cody climbed into the chair, sneakers braced out front, hands gripping the armrests, grinning like the dumbest astronaut in America. And the visual was breathtaking. A grown man in an office chair, in a driveway, being towed by a truck, for sport. This is not a nation. This is performance art by idiots. At first, it was slow. The chair rattled forward across the pavement, wheels chattering like it was trying to file a complaint. Cody was laughing. His friends were howling. One guy was filming, naturally, because modern male friendship is just documentation of preventable crime. And for one cursed little moment, it almost looked survivable. That's always how these things get you. Bad ideas work just long enough to make dumb men feel chosen. So Cody yelled, "Faster!" Of course he did. Because men like Cody never want the amount of chaos they currently have. They always want one click more, one level up, one extra notch of speed between funny story and closed casket energy. The truck accelerated. The chair started fishtailing. Those tiny plastic office wheels, built for corporate carpet, not American asphalt, began hitting every crack, pebble, and imperfection in the driveway, like the universe itself was trying to beat sense back into him one bump at a time. Then one wheel caught. And just like that, the entire dream collapsed. Not metaphorically, physically. All this because Cody looked at a chair made for spreadsheets and decided it belonged in motorsports. He didn't invent a new extreme sport. He just turned workplace furniture into a redneck missile and volunteered to be the payload. Story 4. The Mattress Highway Hero. Larry was the kind of man who thought ropes were optional, physics was negotiable, and renting a truck was the sort of weakness that destroys nations. Need to move a mattress across town? Normal people borrow a truck. Slightly dumber people tie it down badly. Larry looked at a queen-size mattress, a pickup bed, and the interstate, and decided the missing safety device was Larry himself. That was the plan. Not straps, not ratchet tie-downs, not the incredibly cheap and widely available technology known as doing this correctly. No. Larry was going to sit in the back and hold the mattress down with his own body, like some kind of deeply underqualified human paperweight. And the worst part? He genuinely believed this was smart. This was not a man in crisis. This was not an emergency evacuation. This was a Saturday move, the kind of boring domestic errand millions of Americans complete every year without turning themselves into a cautionary tale for upholstery. But Larry had a special disease. He treated every solvable problem like a chance to prove he was tougher than solutions. His brother offered to stop at the hardware store for straps. Larry scoffed. That little scoff kills me every time. That "please, I've got this" noise men make right before gravity starts reading them their rights. Why waste money, he said. I'll just ride with it. Sure, Larry. And if the dishes start sliding in the cabinet, maybe climb in there too. So out they went. Mattress laid flat in the truck bed, hanging out just enough to let the highway know disrespect was coming. Larry climbed into the back, wearing jeans, boots, and the kind of confidence that only exists in men who have never once been corrected hard enough by wind. He straddled the mattress, grabbed both sides, and nodded at his brother in the driver's seat, like a man heading into battle. This is what I love about guys like Larry. They don't just make dumb decisions, they stage them. They sit there like it's a movie trailer, like the soundtrack should swell, like everyone else is about to realize he's a practical genius, instead of a full-grown seatbelt denialist wrestling betting on a freeway. At first, it probably felt fine.
They pulled out of the neighborhood. The truck moved. The mattress stayed put.
Larry's little backyard engineering brain started blooming with confidence. You can almost hear the speech forming in his head already. See? Didn't need straps. Didn't need a rental. Didn't need anything but common sense. No, Larry. This was the opposite of common sense. This was just temporary luck in denim. Then they hit the highway. And that is where air starts having opinions. Because a mattress lying in the bed of a moving truck is not just cargo. It is a giant fabric sail with emotional issues. The faster the truck went, the more that mattress wanted to become an airplane. And Larry, sitting on top of it like a suburban cowboy of stupidity, was apparently shocked to discover that wind exists in larger quantities at highway speeds. The mattress began to lift. Just a little at first. A flutter. A tug. A subtle warning from the universe saying, "Hey man, this is insane." Larry did what men like Larry always do when a bad plan starts wobbling. He held on harder, as if commitment could replace engineering. He leaned forward, grabbed tighter, planted himself deeper, like body weight alone was going to defeat airflow, drag, and every law of motion that had ever made a thing move. It did not. Because the mattress didn't care about Larry's budget, it cared about velocity. And in one beautiful, horribly stupid moment, Larry discovered that "I'll just hold it" is not a transportation strategy. It's just something a man says right before he personally joins the cargo. All this because he didn't want to buy straps. He looked at a moving truck, a queen mattress, and the open highway, and decided the safest tie-down system was his own confidence. That's not hauling furniture. That's just letting your bedroom set try to kill you in public. Story 5. The DIY Home Defense Trap. King Ron was the kind of man who believed two things with his whole soul. 1. Burglars were everywhere. And 2. He was much smarter than every alarm company in America. Not a little handy, not security conscious. I mean the full suburban paranoia starter pack. Motion lights, warning signs, a garage full of tools, and the unshakable belief that if Kevin McAllister could defend a house with household items, then surely a 47-year-old man with a hardware store rewards account could do even better. So when somebody stole a leaf blower out of his shed, Ron took it personally. Not like a normal person. Not, "That sucks, maybe I should get a lock." No. He acted like a foreign government had launched a direct attack on his property rights. For 3 straight days, he walked around the backyard with his hands on his hips, muttering phrases like, "Not on my watch," and "We're gonna see who's laughing next time," as if the raccoon-level criminal who stole his yard equipment had declared war. A sane man would have bought a better padlock. A slightly dumber man would have installed a camera. Ron, however, decided to build a trap. That's where this story leaves civilization. Because once a grown man starts saying the phrase, "I got a little setup for him," he is no longer doing home security. He is auditioning for a very specific kind of police report. Ron didn't want deterrence. He wanted justice. Homemade, overcomplicated, deeply illegal justice. His wife asked what he was doing in the garage. Ron gave that little scary calm answer men give when they've already crossed the mental state line and don't plan on coming back. Fixing the problem. That should have triggered an air horn. Now, Ron's system was exactly the kind of thing you get when a man has half a YouTube education, full confidence, and access to rope, springs, scrap lumber, nails, and one absolutely catastrophic misunderstanding of cause and effect. He rigged the shed door so that if someone opened it the wrong way, a heavy board would swing down. He added fishing line. He added tension. He added what he called a surprise factor, which is never a phrase that belongs near your own property unless you're running a haunted corn maze. And because dumb men can never leave bad alone until it becomes beautifully stupid, he decided to test it himself. That's the masterpiece here. He didn't wait for a burglar. He didn't let time pass. He couldn't. Because men like Ron are never building traps for criminals. They're building traps for their own ego. He needed to see it work. He needed proof. He needed the emotional high of watching his little garage war crime perform exactly as imagined.
So out he went into the yard, puffed up with pride, one hand already half raised like he expected applause from invisible neighbors. "All right," he said, "watch this." That phrase should be carved into a cemetery gate. He stepped up to the shed, reached for the handle, and started explaining the mechanics out loud, which is such a perfect American man detail. The need to narrate your own downfall like you're hosting a DIY show for divorced dads. Then the line caught. The board moved. The surprise factor activated. And suddenly, Ron wasn't protecting the shed anymore. He was standing in his own backyard, getting introduced to the fact that homemade traps do not care who sets them off first. All this because somebody stole a leaf blower. Ron didn't build a security system. He just made his own property more dangerous than the burglars. Story 6. The Backyard Zipline. Visionary. Kyle was the kind of man who looked at an adventure park and thought, I could absolutely build that. Worse, at home. Zipline tickets? Too expensive. Professional gear? For cowards. A backyard, some cable, and a level of confidence that should have required adult supervision? Now we're cooking. Kyle hated paying for experiences. If something cost money, he instantly became spiritually convinced he could recreate it with one trip to the hardware store and a total misunderstanding of physics. So one summer, staring across his yard, he came up with a plan so aggressively suburban, it practically smelled like charcoal and bad insurance. He was going to build a zipline from the roof of his garage to the big oak tree at the back fence. That should have been the moment his brain stepped in and tackled him. It did not. Instead, he bought steel cable, clamps, one pulley, and just enough wrong information from the internet to feel like he had a degree in figuring stuff out. His friends stood around watching the setup come together, the way men always do when they know something is stupid but still want front row seats. "Looks solid," one of them said. "No, Chad, it looks present." Different word. Now, a real zipline has harnesses, tested anchors, braking systems, and people who understand angles. Kyle had a cable tied to a tree and, for reasons that should honestly get a man fined, a plastic lawn chair rigged under the pulley. Not a harness, not a seat built for speed, a lawn chair. This man looked at gravity and said, what if patio furniture joined the project? His wife came outside, took one look at it, and asked the only intelligent question within 50 yards. Please tell me nobody's actually using that. Kyle laughed. That little backyard laugh, the one that means a grown man has already mistaken his own excitement for structural safety. I'll go first. Of course he would. So up he climbed onto the garage roof in shorts and sneakers, clipped himself into the world's dumbest transportation system, and smiled down at his friends like he was about to change recreation forever. Then he pushed off. And for one glorious, cursed little second, it almost worked. He slid out over the yard. His friends screamed. Someone filmed. Kyle probably felt incredible, like an inventor, a daredevil, a man who had finally beaten capitalism with rope. Then the line sagged. Because cable stretches, weight matters, trees move. And physics, unlike Kyle's friends, was not there to support him emotionally. The chair dipped lower, then lower. And suddenly Kyle wasn't riding a zipline anymore. He was slowly discovering that he had built a backyard pendulum with no adult in charge. All this because he didn't want to pay for a real zipline. He didn't build an adventure ride. He just turned a garage, a tree, and a lawn chair into a very personal argument with gravity. Story 7. The Shopping Cart Downhill Champion. Nate was the kind of man who could look at a shopping cart and immediately think, transportation. Not groceries, not errands, not the noble suburban duty of buying 12 things you didn't need because Target played soft jazz and weak psychology. No, to Nate, a shopping cart was a race car that hadn't realized its potential yet. It was late, he was with friends, and they were all operating at that dangerous level of boredom where the male brain starts treating public property like a design challenge. Parking lot, mild hill, one abandoned shopping cart. That should have been the whole scene, a boring little slice of America. But Nate saw the slope and got that stupid little sparkle in his eye, the one that says,
This is either going to be legendary or medically expensive. Bet this thing flies, he said. That sentence has never improved an evening. Now, shopping carts are not built for speed. They're built to carry cereal, frozen pizza, and the emotional weight of buying family-size Oreos at 10:40 p.m. Their wheels already wobble at walking pace. At downhill momentum, they become metal skeletons with trust issues. But Nate wasn't thinking about wheel stability, center of gravity, or the fact that the cart had all the steering precision of a drunk goose. He was thinking about the story, the clip, the moment. That magical little male fantasy where everybody screams your name and nobody says the word concussion. So he climbed in, which is already art. A full-grown man folded into a shopping cart, knees up, hands gripping the sides, grinning like the dumbest astronaut in Walmart history. His friends were laughing, filming, and contributing absolutely nothing useful to civilization. One of them gave the cart a little test push. Nate yelled, "Nah, harder!" Of course he did, because bad ideas only become truly American once somebody adds unnecessary force. So his buddy shoved, and for one beautiful, deeply cursed second, Nate was thrilled. The cart picked up speed, wind in his face, friends screaming, tiny wheels rattling like they were trying to call a lawyer. In his head, he was probably Tony Hawk meets Dale Earnhardt meets an active burden on the healthcare system. Then the front wheel caught, not on a giant pothole, not on some dramatic obstacle, just a small crack, a stupid little flaw in the pavement. The exact kind of thing normal vehicles survive every day because they were designed by adults. A shopping cart is not. The whole thing jerked sideways instantly. Nate's body kept going. The cart did something between a spin, a collapse, and a public confession. And suddenly, the parking lot was no longer a racetrack. It was a very fast lesson in why grocery equipment should remain emotionally attached to groceries. All this because Nate saw a hill and thought the missing ingredient was himself. He didn't invent a new sport. He just turned retail infrastructure into a metal suggestion box for terrible ideas. Story 8. The Living Room Generator. Genius. Rick was the kind of man who treated power outages like a personal insult, not an inconvenience, not weather, a betrayal. If the lights went out, Rick didn't think, let's wait it out. He thought, I am about to outsmart the electric company with hardware and spite. So when a storm knocked out power across the neighborhood, normal people did normal people things. Flashlights, candles, sitting quietly in the dark pretending it was kind of cozy, while secretly hating every second of it. Rick had a generator, and unfortunately, Rick also had ideas. Now, a generator is supposed to live outside, away from doors, away from windows, away from the part of the house where lungs are doing business. This is not secret knowledge. This is not elite engineering wisdom guarded by monks. It's basic, please remain among the breathing information. Rick, however, looked at the rain outside and decided the generator needed to come in. Not fully inside the living room, because even Rick wasn't that cinematic, but close, real close. Garage door cracked a little, maybe near the back door, just enough for him to say, it's basically outside, which is exactly the kind of sentence men use when they are about to negotiate with fumes. His wife asked the obvious question, should that be in here? Rick gave that little dad laugh, that awful suburban chuckle that means he's about to trust vibes over oxygen. It's fine, there's airflow. No, Rick, a cracked garage door is not airflow. That's just denial with a draft. So he fired it up, and immediately he felt like a genius. The fridge hummed, the TV came back on, a lamp lit up. Somewhere in his soul, Rick started composing the speech he'd later give about how preparedness matters and how people today just don't know how to solve problems anymore. That's always the dangerous moment, when a stupid plan works for 5 minutes and the dumbest person involved mistakes that for mastery. Because generators are funny like that. They'll let you feel smart right before they start making your bloodstream regret your whole personality. The fumes built slowly, quietly. No fireball, no dramatic spark. Just that invisible, odorless kind of danger that seems almost rude in how little it announces itself. Rick sat there in his recliner, watching TV like a man who thought he had defeated the storm through raw middle management energy. Then came the headache. Then the dizziness. Then that weird, heavy, floaty feeling where your body starts filing complaints and your brain responds by becoming less useful than usual, which, for Rick, was already a crowded field. All this because he didn't want the generator to get wet. He looked at a machine designed to stay outside, brought it right up to the house, and decided close enough was a safety plan. He didn't beat the blackout. He just traded darkness for the dumbest possible version of indoor ambiance. Story 9. The Backyard Rocket Scientist. Evan was the kind of man who couldn't enjoy a hobby unless he had first made it illegal in spirit. Normal model rockets? Too small. Store-bought kits? Too for kids. Following the instructions written by people who understand thrust, pressure, and why eyebrows matter? Apparently beneath him. So when Evan got into backyard rockets, he didn't just want to launch little plastic tubes into the sky like a normal suburban nerd. No, he wanted power, speed, spectacle. He wanted the kind of launch that made the neighbors stop grilling and say, "That man should not be trusted with PVC." Now, model rockets are already one of those hobbies where common sense needs to stay on the field at all times. There's fuel, ignition, angle, distance, launch direction, a whole list of things standing between fun science afternoon and local news sentence. Evan looked at that whole list and treated it like optional reading, because the first few launches had gone fine, and that's always the problem. A dumb man survives phase 1 and immediately starts thinking he's Oppenheimer in cargo shorts. So he upgraded. Bigger tube, more propellant, stronger ignition, a few little modifications based on internet forums, half-remembered physics, and the deeply American belief that if something is fun at one speed, it must be better at stupid speed. His wife asked what he was doing. Evan gave that same poisoned little answer all these guys give when they're about to make a backyard legally interesting. Just improving it. No, Evan. Sharpening mower blades is improving it. What you were doing was giving a toy rocket a villain arc. So out in the yard he went. Launch stand set up. Friends gathered around. One guy already holding a phone because male friendship at this level is mostly just future evidence. The rocket itself looked wrong. Too big. Too aggressive. Too much like something built in a garage by a man who says, "The government doesn't want you knowing this." And Evan loved that. He stood there with the launch controller in one hand, smiling like a man about to make science his whole personality for the next 9 seconds. He even gave a little speech about real power, which is hilarious coming from a guy wearing lawn shoes next to a homemade missile. Then he hit the ignition, and for one bright, beautiful second, it worked. The engine caught, flame blasted. Everybody yelled. Evan probably felt incredible, like NASA had been foolish to ignore him. Then the rocket stopped behaving like a rocket. Because rockets, much like electricity and wild animals, get very disrespectful the second you stop respecting them. Instead of going up clean, this thing kicked, wobbled, and turned sideways with the exact energy of an object that had just realized it had been built by an idiot. All this because Evan thought hobby rocket sounded too small. He didn't want a science project. He wanted a backyard missile with vibes. And that is how a man takes one of the nerdiest hobbies in America and somehow turns it into a full-contact argument with thrust. Story 10. The Gender Reveal War Criminal. Tyler was the kind of man who couldn't just share news like a civilized human. A phone call? Too boring. A cake? Too weak. A balloon with colored confetti? Apparently an insult to his bloodline. No, Tyler needed spectacle. He needed smoke, noise, debris, and the kind of attention that makes neighbors come outside holding beverages and concern. Because he and his wife weren't just having a baby. In Tyler's mind, they were producing content. So when it came time for the gender reveal, normal suggestions started coming in. Just cut a cake. Pop a balloon. Do the baseball thing. Reasonable ideas. Cheap ideas. Survivable ideas. Tyler rejected all of them with the energy of a man who had absolutely confused fatherhood with event production. We need something people will remember. That sentence should require a permit. Now, this was taking place in a backyard because, of course it was. Every great American disaster starts in one of three places: a garage, a bar, or a backyard with folding chairs. There were pink and blue decorations everywhere, family milling around, one aunt already crying for no reason, and a grill going in the corner like the universe was trying to add one last touch of domestic innocence before Tyler ruined it. His big idea? A homemade gender cannon. Not a professional device, not something rented from people who enjoy staying licensed. A homemade launcher, built from pipe, pressure, optimism, and the exact type of confidence that makes hardware store employees quietly stop asking follow-up questions. Because Tyler didn't just want confetti, he wanted impact. He wanted that big movie moment where everybody screams, colored powder fills the sky, and he gets to stand there like a suburban king who has successfully weaponized reproduction. His wife asked if it was safe. Tyler gave the same answer all doomed men give when they've already crossed the point of no return. Totally. No, Tyler, tape is holding it together is not the same thing as totally. He had spent 2 nights assembling this thing in the garage, which is already a bad sign. Nothing homemade gets better after midnight in a garage unless it's a sandwich. He'd packed the chamber himself, tested none of it, explained all of it. And the more he explained it, the worse it sounded, which is also a very American trait. Men love describing catastrophic nonsense in calm, technical language, like that somehow turns it into engineering. By party time, the whole family was gathered in the yard. Phones out, kids excited, grandparents confused. Tyler stood next to the cannon with one hand on the trigger mechanism and the smile of a man who was about to learn the difference between dramatic and structurally unsound. And for 1 second, standing there in front of all those people, he probably felt amazing, important, powerful, like the main character. That's always the dangerous part, because bad ideas work just long enough in a man's imagination to make him believe he is the exception. That this backyard pipe bomb for baby news is somehow going to be the classy one, the safe one, the one that turns out magical instead of medically informative. Then he fired it. And the device responded the way homemade pressure gadgets always respond when built by a man who says stuff like, "I pretty much know what I'm doing." Immediately, loudly, and with absolutely no respect for the moment. All this to announce whether the baby would wear blue or pink. Tyler didn't just reveal a gender. He took one of the simplest announcements in human history and turned it into a backyard OSHA prophecy, which is honestly the most American thing on this entire list. So what did we learn tonight? Apparently, common sense is not a universal feature. Some people look at a warning sign and think, cute suggestion. Others look at a wild animal, a homemade launcher, a shopping cart, or a pressure-filled object and think, this is my moment. It was not their moment. It was reality's. These weren't unlucky people. These were grown adults who took perfectly survivable situations and personally upgraded them into Darwin Awards applications. One bad idea, one extra push, one, watch this, and suddenly the whole story belongs to natural selection. So go ahead, tell me in the comments which one was the dumbest. And more importantly, tell me which one made you pause and think, yeah, that absolutely sounds like something a guy named Tyler would do.